Gerald Muswagon, the man that bought lottery tickets with only $2 and ended up winning $10 million. But what happened after that big lottery win with his life will absolutely blow your mind. How it all began. Gerald Muswagon was born on the 22nd of August, 1961, in a remote community in Manitoba, Canada. He had a pretty modest upbringing under religious parents despite their poverty, and he didn't have any formal education as his family couldn't afford to send him to school. From an early age, he would be introduced into labor and had to work hard to support the family. All he knew was poverty, financial difficulty, and lack. He owed everything he had to his effort, and nothing was handed to him for free. But one day, everything changed. He had just finished his shift, and the supervisor was handing out paychecks. When Gerald received his pay, he felt a deep sense of dissatisfaction, knowing that this miserly pay would take him nowhere in life. That's when he decided to join his friends, who often used a bit of their salary to purchase the lottery ticket. Now, of course, he did understand that the probability of winning the lottery was quite slim, but he just wanted to do something, anything that gave him the slightest consolation that he was doing everything that he could. He would buy his lottery tickets and wait for the announcements with a keen ear, but each and every time the winning numbers would be announced, he would be unlucky. From broke to millionaire. One day, Gerald was returning from his workplace, and with just $2 in his pocket, he decided to stop into a store and grab a Super 7 lottery ticket. He was completely unaware that this little investment was going to be all he needed to change his life. When his numbers were announced later that day as the winner of the lottery, Gerald was ecstatic, calling every person he knew while announcing the good news. He had just won $10 million. The amount of money was unfathomable to Gerald. All of his dreams had come true in the blink of an eye, and not only was he an instant millionaire, he was one of the biggest lottery winners in Canadian history as of that moment. News of his lucky lottery winning quickly spread across town, as well as the media, and everyone wanted a piece of Gerald. Journalists wanted to interview him, television stations wanted him on their programs, and it was needless to say he was the hottest thing in town. People around him were overjoyed and inspired by his stories, but some couldn't help but feel jealous and upset at his achievements. He was not prepared for the sudden wealth and ended up making some of the biggest mistakes ever. Of course, he went on a shopping spree where he would walk into shops and luxury clothing stores and clear out the high-end clothing and jewelry. His look began to change as he started to dress flashy for publicity, and because of this, he attracted the wrong elements to himself. He would meet with friends at clubs and bars and drop large sums of money to clear their bills, even dropping excessively generous tips for beautiful waitresses. He bought exotic new sports cars for himself, his friends, and family, and was reported to have purchased 8 brand new flat-screen televisions for friends in a 24-hour period. He was quite generous to the people around him, able to spread out some help to people who were in poverty, providing them with small sums of money to start small businesses. His generosity would earn him a good reputation in the community, and everyone around him knew that he had a kind heart and was always willing to help out. One of the biggest personal investments was a massive home that he bought in Manitoba. The house was seated on a lot of real estate that was used as a party home where him and his friends and his fans could converge and party both day and night. Gerald became conscious of his safety and was not comfortable going to clubs, so he needed a way to bring the party to him, and he furnished his home to have all of the features that were required to host all kinds of events. 2 years after his lottery winnings, Gerald realized he had mostly been spending without making any money back. He needed to create a business that would enable him to reinvest his money and make returns, and so he decided to start a logging business called Gerald's Logging, since he was familiar with the dynamics of that business. Sadly though, Gerald didn't have what it took to run a business, and it had to close down due to low sales. He tried a few other opportunities, but just didn't have the right people for the job, and so, instead of establishing something profitable, he would often end up wasting money on resources and assets like equipment for his business, and after a few weeks, it would fold due to inexperience and lack of coordination. Gerald didn't trust anyone around him as being a co-owner of any business, as most people were only there to profit from him or take what they wanted. He began spending more time with friends, drinking and passing the time, and over time, his motivation for starting a profitable business began to wane. This is where the troubles all began. Bad choices. Running the business had put a bit of a strain on Gerald, reintroducing him back into the work life that he had long abandoned. He was no longer used to the hard labor he had grown up in and went back into a life of partying. He was also introduced to other vices like drugs and alcohol, which he had used in copious amounts. He became reckless with his finances and was unable to tell how much he had in his bank account most of the time. And it also didn't help that he was always surrounded by people who cheered him on when he made a reckless purchase or showered them with gifts and money. It wouldn't be long until he began having clashes with the law. In October of 2000, Gerald was returning home from a night of partying and smothered in drugs and alcohol when he began to sway from side to side on the road, putting other drivers at risk. He also stood out in his brand new Chevy Silverado while doing over 180 kilometers per hour. He would be tracked down by police and things got out of hand, and he found himself being chased by half a dozen police cars on a busy road. He was then apprehended and taken to court where he pled guilty and would be slapped with 3 months in prison. This would not be Gerald's first run-in with the law though, as he had several arrests in the past beginning from 1981 all the way to the 2000s. He'd been arrested for crimes like drunk driving, robbery, and assault, and after 3 months, he regained his freedom and began to reflect on his life. He had wanted to do things differently in order to keep himself out of the public eye and the media, as he kept getting into trouble and the media was always there to cover the story. He had lost his wife to a brief illness in mid-2002 and was filled with so much pain that he hired a young 19-year-old housekeeper to take care of his home on a daily basis. In November of 2002, he would be charged with sexual assault, where it was reported that he had assaulted the young girl on numerous occasions, especially when he was under the influence. At first, she had kept the altercation secret because she didn't want to lose her job, but when it became more frequent, she had to speak up. Gerald pled guilty to the crime and was sentenced to a few months in prison. The court was also aware he had 6 dependents and allowed him to work on a farm on the weekdays to earn minimum wage. He would then serve his sentence in the weekends, and this way he could support his children financially. Just when he thought that things could not get any worse, the next phase of his life would completely change everything. Isolation and final years. Gerald began to distance himself from everyone who was close to him. He had gone from millionaire to broke in just 7 years after having won $10 million and began to reflect on how he had lived his life and the things that he could have done differently. Needless to say, all of his assets were already sold or seized, so he had absolutely nothing to his name. He had been married for years, and even though he had 6 children to be grateful for, his wife was no longer there to support him emotionally. He felt more alone than he had ever been in his life, and in many ways blamed the lottery for his misfortune. He thought the sudden wealth affected the relationship between him and his wife and had caused him to make all of those poor choices. He had been dealing with depression and major emotional struggles, and to make things worse, he also suffered withdrawal from drugs that he had been accustomed to taking when he was wealthy enough to afford them. Now he had to suffer from the consequences of quitting drugs. Sad and alone, he then decided to do something that nobody expected. He took his own life by hanging himself in his mother's garage. His lifeless body would be found the next day. It was 2005, and he had died at the age of 42. His loved ones would go on to comment that he had many demons that he had fought since his early days growing up in a poor home, and when the sudden wealth came, he entered into a full-blown self-destructive character that had taken him down this path. His lack of education had doomed him from the onset, and in an interview, his cousin blamed his misfortune on the lack of quality people around him to guide him on how to invest his money wisely. Gerald's life is a cautionary tale of the lessons and burdens that a life-changing fortune can bring. What do you think about the millionaire story of Gerald Muswagon? Be sure to let me know all about it in the comments below. Hit that notification bell and subscribe to the channel so you'd never miss another video in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.